Szanowni Państwo, dyscyplina czasowa to jest podstawa danego.
Ladies and gentlemen, respecting the time schedule is what makes any forum successful. That's why I would like to invite you to a debate that we are about to hold on the main stage. The debate is entitled "The Future Begins Today, Mazovia and the European Union up until 2030. The debate will be devoted about the development opportunities that the EU funds from the 2021-2027 period will bring to our region. The panelists are as follows: Adam Struzik, the Marshal of the Mazovia region, and Sebastian Gojc, who represents the DG on Regional and Urban Policy of the European Commission. The debate will be hosted by Mariusz Frankowski, the Director of the Mazovian Unit for the implementation of the EU program.
Szanowni Państwo, bardzo krótko rozpoczynamy, jesteśmy lekko spóźnieni.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're slightly behind the schedule, so let's begin without further ado. We have the Marshal with us, we have Sebastian Gojc with us,
Kończymy okres programowania.
and we have come to a turning point. We are about to end the 2014-2020 programming period. We are spending the last euros allocated for the previous period, and luckily we already have the new EU fund program approved. This happened last week. So the program for the new period 2021-2027 is approved, and this will give an important stimulus for development of our region. We have a difficult 2 years and a half behind us. The pandemic, the war in Ukraine and crisis, it generated the inflation, the energy crisis, etc. These are major challenges for the local government and for other beneficiaries of the EU funds. If I may, I will start with a question addressed at the representative of the EU Commission. Can you please outline the priorities of the cohesion policy for the coming years? How can we use the funds best to make our cities and regions more resilient in these turbulent times? Good morning. First, I would like to thank you for organizing this forum and for inviting us. Second, I would like to express my appreciation for the cooperation that we had with the Marshal with regard to preparing the documents necessary to apply for the EU funds in the period 2021-2027. This was hard work, and we managed to forge a compromise on numerous issues. Now, about the cohesion policy and the EU policy at large. What are its priorities? What we would like to achieve in the coming years? Each European policy has a strategy of economic development as its cornerstone, and the current strategy is the European Green Deal. Therefore, our priorities are aligned with the European Green Deal, and on the priorities of the European Green Deal are the main focus of our talks with our partners all over Europe. We want the investments carried out using the EU funds to support energy efficiency as well as an improvement of skills and development of digital technologies. The new skills as well as development technology, as well as new technologies, will help us to catch up with the pace of global development. Now, regarding the funds allocated to our region, nearly 30% of all the funds allocated under this program will tackle environmental challenges. We are currently experiencing a shortage of fossil fuels.
To, co zaczęliśmy wcześniej, okazało się rzeczywiście
A part of these funds are supposed to help to remedy us. We actually started working on that a few years back, and now we are slowly start to reap benefits, also in the Mazovian region.
Panie Marszałku,
Thank you.
jakie
Mr. Marshall, what are the priorities of your region for the coming years?
samych
I'm asking about priorities regarding the EU funds and the EU programs, but not only.
wykorzystywać, żeby budować miasta i
How can we make the best use of funds to build resilience of cities and regions in our current difficult times?
Pojawiły się czarne łabędzie.
We do live in times of uncertainty. Black swans have appeared in the global economy. The first was the COVID pandemic. The second was the war in Ukraine. Both events have destabilized economy in many areas. Let's take hospitals.
Przestały być problemem. Zaczęliśmy ograniczać na przykład funkcjonowanie takich oddziałów.
When contagious diseases stopped to be the major threat to public health, we started to close the wards dedicated to contagious diseases. And then the pandemic hit us, and that forced us to revise our approach to public health care. Thanks to good cooperation with the European Commission, we managed to carry out the largest project in the whole EU, worth 100 million euro. With this money, we bought life-saving equipment and diagnostic equipment for our hospitals. Without this money, we would have struggled at the early stages of the pandemic. And not only, also the diagnostic remained proper diagnosis remained a challenge in later stages of the pandemic as well. Infectious diseases may appear out of the blue. Therefore, the public healthcare system must always be ready for this scenario. The EU funds allowed us to allocate some money to the hospitals and will continue to develop some parts of public healthcare using the EU funds. Another important area to which we allocate the funds is digitization of public services at large. We are currently witnessing the fourth industrial revolution, which means digitizing of public administration, digitizing entrepreneurs, and I believe this process of digitization is the key to building resilience. The volatility of the energy sector and energy markets forces us to invest in energy efficiency and in generating energy from renewable sources. Thirdly, we need to improve our energy management to limit energy waste. Therefore, smart management must be expanded to include energy systems.
Fundusze Europejskie dla Mazowsza, rzeczywiście.
So we intend to allocate a lot of the EU funds for the EU for such solutions. We also want to develop carbon-neutral transportation. We also want to help small and medium enterprises modernize. We want to give them full access and benefits of the fourth industrial revolution. During our meeting in Płock, we visited carpentry plant. They were manufacturing window frames. They purchased new equipment, automated, and thanks to those new automated digitized solutions, they were able to develop a much better products offer, because this transported them from using manual labor to automation. And this example illustrates well that modernization is crucial, and that modernization, automation build resilience, economic resilience. Improved processes make businesses more resilient to also geopolitical difficulties.
Pytanie będzie dotyczyło
Question number 2
jakby budowania spójności
pertains to developing cohesion at the regional level on the one hand, as there are two parts
różnice rozwojowe.
which, statistically speaking, tell different development stories, especially if you juxtapose it with the respective GDPs. That is one thing. That is, we've got one region, we've got one EU programs for Mazovia. So, in this slide, how to develop the story for Mazovia. How should we build up this cohesion? And how should this cohesion look when confronted with other regions? Truth to be told, Mazovian is a pretty unique standing. It is to be also seen as such in the Europe scale. This very region is characterized by grand accomplishments in the area of innovation, for example, and this is something that Marshall was outlining. Some who have never been there could have a somewhat false impression this is what makes up Mazovia. But if you go beyond the Warsaw borders, the situation starts looking somewhat different. As we speak with the European Commission, and talks featured also Marshall, we were trying to do some convincing in this respect. That is, Mazovia should not be treated like this. Because we won't be, if that's done this way, we won't be able to have this even allocation. Therefore, two sub-regions were sectioned off. And we, of course, resorted to some specific classification. And so this region is split into two. That is also Capital Region and this second region, second sub-region. For how the EU Commission looks at it, we can just set some frameworks. That is, for the forthcoming years, 2021-2027, 70% of the EU Development Fund is to be allocated for somewhat less developed regions, and 78 of the EU Social Fund is dedicated to these regions. Some allocations are different. Nevertheless, this is the framework set by the European Commission. And that's the result of talks that we had with the European Commission, with the representatives of the implementation unit, and how these funds are going to be addressed. That's something to be dwelled on by Marshall. Over to you. We strived for this split for some years now. We consider it a success. And the fact that we managed to convince the Polish government that this is the way to go, and it happened in 2018. And likewise, we did manage to convince the EU to move on with it. We were, on our end, sure that if this split is not the case, it would produce some negative ramifications for the whole cohesion policy in Europe. Without this statistical division, we would have like 500 million euro in terms of allocation. Now we are speaking about the total of 2,096 million euro. Just to give you some benchmark. So we have managed to convince our partners that 1,600 million euro more is something that we actually need. The cohesion policy and how it is statistically approached bases on regional indices and bases on this very statistical division that we now have. As a consequence, we need to act in a smart manner. We need to steward the cohesion policy in a way to embrace the whole region, but also the sub-regions. And this is something that we are precisely doing right now, not only taking advantage of the EU funds. As you said beforehand, there will be more funds coming in within the framework of the Mazovian regional funds. We will have 85% for Warsaw and surrounding municipalities. There will be like 50%. But we'll try on our end to mitigate the negative impact of it. Bear in mind, Mazovia is 10th in Europe after UK left the EU in these terms. Of course, this sub-region of Mazovia fares quite well, as it holds like 200-something posts in this classification. So we need to unshackle potential which we have in every single municipality of the Mazovian region. We've got business potential, we've got other sorts of potential. We may think of food manufacturing. We know that extra metropolitan regions are food manufacturers. Look at poultry, look at food processing. With Warsaw being something that stands for new technologies, R&D, innovation. We also have Radom, we also have Płock, we also have Siedlce in terms of bigger cities. Still, R&D is largely located in Warsaw. Therefore, we need to make use of potential where they are as we go. It is for years now that we've been postulating that Warsaw is our locomotive towards Europe, and Mazovia should follow suit. So Warsaw is something that we consider a catalyst for the whole rest of the Mazovian region, and this rest of the Mazovian region still develops itself in line with the potentials it has. So we will take advantage of it. We will direct support whenever needed. If one area, let's imagine, is good at going green, it means we need to invest there in tourism, in biodiversity, in waste management. To cut the long story short, we need to invest wherever ROIs are greatest. And of course, entrepreneurship is something that we want to foster everywhere because the access to EU funds for SMEs is of unprecedented importance. You know, we are fully focused on the new European Green Deal, new technologies, going digital. But let's not disregard mounting social challenges. There are significant funds in the European Social Fund allocated for Mazovia. Why? We are fully aware of the fact that there are whole groups of people who are disadvantaged. There are people with disabilities. There are seniors. We need to cater to them as well. And poverty, 1,000 Mazovian citizens live on the verge of poverty. We need to have a full picture of it. And to relate to your question, we are striving for sustainable development, taking use of respecting regional potentials or potentials of respective industries. All the partners that are ready to move on in terms of their development. And just to finish off, if I may, one last statement. We also have our own capital. We are ambitious in how we design the budget for the year to come, and it is a total of more than 2 billion Polish zlotys that we want to allocate for investments, plus 700 million Polish zlotys to be dedicated to the development of municipalities as well as NGOs, so that local development is stimulated as well from our own capital. And this is the kind of cohesion policy that we steward, not solely basing on EU funds, but also basing on our own funds as well. And this is what MP Olbrycht said in his speech. These all funds complement each other. A practical question, if I may. A question to the representative of the European Commission. A question about flexibility. Look at the last 2 years that have passed. You've been flexible enough more than you ever were. And that's good in terms of fund management. Especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, you did accept a vast healthcare-centered program and that ensured funding for 70 healthcare entities in the whole region. It was fast and quick and swift. And by the same token, you did reply aptly to the ensuing war in Ukraine, something that came unexpected to all of this. Your reply was also quick, different to what we had imagined. These were different funds that we are speaking about. My point is, you've been pretty flexible in terms of how money can be spent. Therefore, my question, should this flexibility policy be on a track to being continued? And if yes, how? It's hard not to relate to what Marshall has just said as he delved into a number of important items. Almost 500 million zlotys have been used here and allocated here in Mazovia for mitigating the effect of COVID. That's fact. Of course, we were all taken aback by the pandemic, yet the EC responded swiftly. Spending rules were loosened up, and it was something unprecedented. Yet, thanks to this, we managed to save hundreds or thousands or millions of lives and jobs. And it is also owing to this very decision on the part of the European Commission that we are currently managing to exit this crisis. And as we do go out, we have been hit by yet another crisis. War. The Russian aggression on Ukraine. And again, it made the European Commission feel committed vis-à-vis the member states. The European Commission decide to help the governments out to go through this crisis. And of course, this COVID crisis has been addressed, so to say, more abundantly. And then came the second crisis. Perhaps if crises come one after the other, it's hard to respond to the latter one as abundantly and as we responded to the first one. Now to answer your question. Let's never again have the need to have this kind of flexibility, because this always comes as a consequence of something as unexpected as the crises that we were faced up with. We are, as you know, representatives of the local authorities in the European Committee of the Regions. I've been there quite long, since 2003. We've been always talking about the need for flexibility, loosening up bureaucracy, eliminating the red tape. And now COVID came and made Brussels bureaucrats realize that we need to be able to act swiftly. There will always be this need to plan, but there might be things for which you can never plan. And you deserve our many thanks in this respect. We did apply for the permit of some reshuffles in how we spend the money, and it just took 3 days from you to reply. And this is the kind of flexibility which is irrevocable in such times of crisis. And let's also come to senses ourselves and try to search for some solutions that would be our beneficiaries oriented. Our mindset should be as follows. How can I help my beneficiary? How can my beneficiary take advantage of the funds? Because we are there to ensure the proper allocation of funds and the proper spending. Let's bear in mind, regulations may be changed, may be amended. You can always have some amendments entering into force. There might be such amendments of regulations and other provisions. We mustn't operate in a kind of vicious circle that some things are insurmountable. No. We need to employ this flexibility. We need to be attentive to what our beneficiaries actually need. We need to be mindful of their arguments to one end. To another end, we should be pretty tough on certain lobbying endeavors. But let's think in favor of our beneficiaries. Let's remember it is their goal as well to act effectively in terms of money spending. And I believe that should be also our striving, the striving of our institutions. And should there be any need for law amendment, please notify it. Everyone can make a mistake. The Parliament can, the government can. And if mistakes are made, corrections are needed. There are some review mechanisms in place,
rozwiązane przez
periodical reviews, and so there are mechanisms, there are vehicles that we can apply if need be. Right, and we are here at the 12th forum, 12th Mazovia Development Forum. We were speaking here on these matters together with the beneficiaries from the previous perspective and from the current one. Do you have any good practices for the ones who would like to be the beneficiaries in the current period? What kind of threats or risks can you foresee for the coming years as regards the fund allocation?
O, proszę bardzo.
Rekomendacje odwagi.
Well, I would recommend courage and boldly applying for funds. We have just opened a new programming period. New programming period means new priorities. On behalf of the European Commission, I would like to encourage you to be innovative, we have a host of instruments. We can offer you grants as well as loans. In particular, I have in mind loans for entrepreneurs who are willing to take risks without a guarantee that they will have a return on investment, or when the return on investment would happen. Another recommendation from me is to stay in touch with each other. So what I have in mind is staying in touch with the representatives of the authorities and with the society at large, and keeping track of new programs. The new European Bauhaus is an example of how the new priorities can be combined to create a way of communicating on the local level. And are there any threats? I don't know, difficult to say. As of now, we are at the very beginning of the program, the future looks bright, and I keep fingers crossed. We've been in the EU for 18 years now. We have just closed a full programming period. So I think that we had the time to learn how to make best use of the EU funds and how to best apply for them. So the open question is, what do we want to achieve, and what funds do we need for it? In what amount? I believe that every municipality, every research unit or university should ask themselves the most basic question, namely, how do I see myself in the future? What are my main challenges? How does it fit into the European policy, and where can I apply for support? I think a good starting point would be reading the manual on how to apply the funds, how to apply for the funds for the Mazovia region. I think this is the obvious starting point. Then you need to fill in all the required documents. This may mean that you will need to update the documents you already have at hand. If you apply for a revitalization program, you need to find out what is the municipal revitalization program, if it has been changed in any way. The same applies to public transportation. The next step is preparing the documents, filling them in. And apply. Well, there is this anecdote about a citizen who prayed to God for 6 months to win the lottery, and after 6 months, God replied, "Stop praying, but buy the lottery ticket." So buy your lottery tickets, that is, send your applications.
prawo zamówień publicznych.
And you also need to take into account the law on public procurement or the law on environmental protection. Because when you're not aware of limitations that are put down in these documents, then your application may be rejected. So I think that this is a roadmap for success for a potential beneficiary. Do you see any threats? I do.
Dzisiaj niestabilny rynek usług budowlanych czy materiałów.
Currently, we have a very volatile market for construction materials and construction services.
Sprostać wymaganiom finansowym, przetargowym, na jakieś sytuacji, w której
Our contractors, for instance, are unable to fulfill their contracts that they were awarded on the basis of public procurement. They contracted a given amount, and with rising construction material prices, they are just unable to afford the materials to perform their work. So this is a threat. I also see a lot of threats in our political life. I think it's high time for Poland to stop fighting against the European Commission. The European Commission is not our enemy. The purpose of this institution is not to humiliate Poland. The European Commission wants to help us. And I see a political threat to the funds. I'm speaking honestly. I'm afraid that we will not be able to fulfill the basic criteria, the basic requirements, and we may receive some advance payments, but I do not know what will happen later. Of course, I do not expect any declarations from you right here, right now. I'm a man serious enough not to expect it. Another threat is of geopolitical nature. The war may escalate, and this is not possible to predict. The financial markets, the inflation, they are also beyond our control, and if it gets out of control, then we won't be able to complete our investments. We also don't have a lot of time left. 2023 is just around the corner. The spending period is until 2027, and then we account for the expenses until 2029. And then there is the interim periodical review. We need to fulfill the milestones, and we need to invest all the funds so that we do not lose any euros. So actually there are quite a lot of threats ahead. Well, this was a bit so on this a bit pessimistic note. No, it wasn't my intention to be pessimistic or to create a negative mood. No, the funds are out there. And I encourage everybody, the entrepreneurs, the heads of municipalities and districts, to reach for them. Gentlemen, thank you. Adam Struzik, the Marshal of the Mazovia region, and Sebastian Gage of the DG.